morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. We have a special guest this morning. I'm going to start introducing her. Elaine Magee, MPH RD, is the author of 25 books, including the best-selling Tell Me What to Eat If I Have Diabetes, and the revolutionary book Food Synergy. In 2020, Elaine was named one of the 10 dietitians making a difference by today's Dietitian magazine, and in 2019 was named one of 11 all-stars in the diabetes world by Diabetes Forecast magazine. She developed the performance dining program for Stanford University while serving as their wellness and performance nutritionist. Elaine, are you there this morning?
I'm here, Richard.
Good morning. Welcome to our podcast, ma'am. So I have obviously great subject, nutrition and aging. So I have some questions for you. So why is healthy aging an important issue for you?
Well, obviously, as a dietitian, it's always been important, right? But as I've gotten older, I've seen friends suffer through various things, right? Friends that went through breast cancer treatment and then the chemo, you know, stimulated a neurological cascade. And this is a friend of mine who recently passed away, but she ended up having, the worst form of Parkinson's. And then another best friend here who lost her husband in his early 60s, from a condition. So, obviously I'm happy to announce I'm 63. So I'm just so you know where I'm coming from. So
Sure.
it's just as you age, I think as I've aged. And then in particular, this past year, so 2023, was really dedicated to taking care of my mother,
Oh,
who
wow.
almost made it to 90. But she had a form of COPD, and just taking care of her, traveling, in my case, traveling to California, every 5 to 6 weeks, checking in. And what I learned was, Richard, that my two sisters live in, closer to her. I'm the one that lives in another state. But guess who was able to sort of see the change that my mom was going through, and to see her needs as they changed. It's the person who's there, 3 days at a time, 24 hours a day. That's the person who can say, wow, mom's not able to, make her meals anymore, or mom's, losing her appetite at dinner, but is somehow managing to make herself a cocktail. I mean, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
I, that was startling to me. So, you know, I would go there, I would stay with her, and that was the way I could contribute as somebody, not close by. But just, being with her and realizing food is more than food, if that makes sense. Can somebody make it? What do they have an appetite for? And also realizing the importance of companionship and company around that meal. It was so obvious that my mom would be more likely to sit and eat a meal if I was eating with her,
Interesting. Sure.
or if we invited her. She was at that point, she was in like a community, a senior apartment community. So her, she had a wonderful relationship with her little next door neighbor, and we would have him over all the time and invite him over, and I would, make various foods. But anyway, that just cemented sort of how important this topic is to me.
No, I can totally understand that. Obviously, all that you've done, your educational background, and then having to deal with this personally with your own mom in 2023, I totally understand that. And that kind of takes me to my next question. From a nutrition and health perspective, what changes as we age?
Yeah, quite a few things, Richard, as you probably know. Just, physiologically, we are less efficient at synthesizing protein. That's one of the reasons. There's many that protein becomes the protein that we eat in our food is even more important in a way as we age. But also, blood pressure tends to increase as we age. So, for somebody who that might not have been an issue with, that can change. The nutrient dense diet, what we eat, what the nutrients, does it have a lot of nutrients? That's what they mean by nutrient dense. Becomes even more important because as we age, we tend to eat less, right? Our metabolic rate goes down. That's another reason why it's good to have muscle mass. That helps increase that metabolic rate. Um, our skin produces less vitamin D from sunlight as we age. So vitamin D, somebody might not have been supplementing with vitamin D, but maybe they need to look into that as they age. Those are just a few examples. Also, inflammation plays a key role in many diseases associated with aging. So overall, just looking about inflammation in our bodies, and are we eating an anti-inflammatory type of diet? Is there some underlying cause that might be contributing to inflammation? All of that, right, becomes more important. And lastly, our brain ages too. So it's more and more important that the foods we eat help protect the brain. And everything does pretty much, fit together when I'm talking later about sort of what are my steps to healthy aging. It does all kind of, it's not like, oh, I'm going to do this for the brain and this for the, inflammation. It all kind of fits together. That's the good news.
No, this is fascinating. And for my listening audience, I mean, and I hate this word assume, but I'm assuming myself, a lot of people, I mean, as you age, like at any time, you're sticking food in your mouth. And I don't know if people are really thinking about the effects of what they eat or what they don't eat. But in the last couple minutes, I mean, every time I do this podcast, I learn so much from my guests. That was a lot of incredible information. What's your advice for healthy aging for folks?
I'm going to, put it in a handful of steps for you. And um, the first one is sort of eat and exercise for the health of it and to boost your muscle mass. So strangely, right? I mean, I feel like when you're young, maybe you're into building muscle because you're, more of an athlete or you're more active or you're, in college or whatever it is. But as we age, that's pivotal. So I'll talk a little bit more about why, but that's that's key. So aiming for at least 20 grams of protein at each meal is is a pretty good rule of thumb. Another tip is filling half your plate with colorful vegetables and fruits. And people ask me all the time, like, are there certain things, plants that we should try to get every day because they're superfoods, right? Um, and there's a couple. I would say try to get a dark leafy green every single day. And things that make that easier are those bagged. I shop at Albertsons, so that bag, of spinach greens or kale that's washed and ready to go, from the bag, like that's so convenient. Throwing that in every time you have soup, stew, every time you make eggs, throw in some dark leafy greens in there, casseroles. Like if it's handy, like just, hey, have I gotten my dark leafy greens today? So that's important. The other superfood probably on the fruit end is berries. And that is berries in the brain. Just remember that. Berries help the brain too, and the heart. They're just beaming with nutrients that we need, polyphenols, all kinds of plant compounds. So I personally try to get berries every day, dark leafy greens every day. But the overall tip is to fill half your plate with colorful fruits and vegetables. Okay. Now, the next tip is to switch to whole grains every chance you get. So, if you're baking, if you're a baker, really looking at, hey, can I replace at least half of this with whole wheat flour? Can I, for this particular casserole, can I use quinoa, right? Can I use brown rice instead of white rice? That sort of thing. Whole grain pastas or chickpea pastas, a lot of gluten-free legume pastas are amazing. Just your breads, your tortillas, whatever it is, right? That's important to you. Can I make a better choice with whole grains? That's going to have fiber, yes, but it's going to have all these other plant compounds that come along with that fiber and that whole grain. So that's the next step. And then enjoying fish and beans and legumes several times a week. I know some people might not care for either of those or tolerate either of those, but if you do, really trying to get fish a couple times a week. It could be albacore tuna packed in water or in a pouch, right? On a Friday, for lunch. It could be a really nice, easy salmon, pan fried salmon. There's also at Albertsons, for example, there's right near the seafood counter, you can get smoked salmon, but not lox, right? The salmon that still looks like salmon but it's smoked and cooked and ready to go. That's how convenient is that, right? You pick that up and you add it to a salad, add it to your eggs, make a salmon toast with avocado. Like that's super easy. You don't even have to cook it. So just looking for opportunities to add seafood and beans and legumes a few times a week. I'm admitting right now to your audience that getting a few servings of beans and legumes is a really that's hard for me. I don't know why. It's just somehow not as easy. Canned beans, frozen edamame, all those make it easier, but I am better at the seafood, believe it or not. So, and back on the grains, I just posted maybe a week ago on my Instagram a pumpkin pancake that I developed that has no sugar added and is 100% whole wheat. And you'd never miss anything. Like it's delicious. So it is possible. Now, also one more tip, nuts and seeds, embracing nuts and seeds and low fat dairy products daily if tolerated. So, for the dairy, that's where you're going to get quality protein. You're going to get some vitamin D, calcium, some of the things we need as we age. If it's not tolerated, well, you can do the lactose free types of milk. I don't necessarily drink milk as a beverage, but I use ultra filtered milk that has higher amounts of protein and less carbohydrate. I'll make overnight chia pudding with that. I use it. I make lattes, with my strong coffee at home. I use it in other ways, not necessarily, for drinking, but anyway. And then nuts and seeds, just huge. And people ask me all the time, is anyone better than the other? And I just think they all bring different things, right? Walnuts have the highest amount of plant omega-3s. But Brazil nuts are shockingly high in selenium, which is a antioxidant mineral. So they each have, and almonds, plant sterols, like they all have their high points. So just in general, whatever nuts and seeds you like. I get chia seeds or ground flaxseed almost every day. They're cousins. So I'll get one or the other almost every day in different ways. So, and those, they just pack a wallop, right? So anyway, and then I guess my last step is to stay as active as you can for as long as you can. That's one of my mottos. And movement, you'll see later, maybe as we get more into some research about the people who have made it to 100 around the world, staying physically active. And it doesn't have to mean, taking an aerobics class or anything. It just means you're moving a lot. You're moving in your day, whether it's gardening, walking with a friend in the neighborhood, playing tennis at the club, whatever it is, however that means to you. Just really trying to stay physically active as much as you can as you age. That is, I think, the elixir. And for me at 63, I started doing Pilates reformer halfway through COVID. And my body, you can tell what your body likes, right? My body loves it. And I feel like it's my version of muscle resistance training, right? Because you're using your body, your appendages as resistance, plus the springs on the reformer. So I do that 3 times a week. That's like my weightlifting, right? I'm just not somebody who's going to go to a gym and lift a bunch of weights, but I can do Pilates class.
Wow.
So I think it's also important to exercise your muscle. It's kind of like use it or lose it on so many levels as you age, using your brain, right? Use your brain, challenge your brain, use your body, challenge your body, like all of that. The more we can keep our bones and our muscle and our brain vibrant as we age, definitely the better off we're going to be.
Folks, this is unbelievable information. I would really encourage you, A, listen to what Elaine's talking about. B, tell your folks about this episode on the podcast, friends, enemies, loved ones, relatives, everybody, coworkers. This is fantastic information. Please pass it along. Elaine, you've mentioned this word protein many, many times. Why
Yeah.
is it so important as we age?
Well, everything, I've already said, but what I want to add to that is in older adults, here's what research is telling us, right? In older adults, higher protein diets are associated with greater lean body mass, which is, so helpful, as I've been telling you, for, just keeping your metabolic rate high. It's associated with better grip strength, better lower body strength, better physical function, and just better activities, greater activities of daily life. So, I mean, it's just becomes crucial. Just becomes crucial. It's keeps us stronger, less likely to fall, which, as you know, I'm sure in your audience, falling becomes such a risk, for various reasons. Um, and then just keeping that darn metabolic rate higher as we age, so we're able to kind of eat 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 more food so that we have more opportunity to get the nutrients we need, right? Otherwise it's just kind of like a downward spiral. I think at some point, less active, less muscle strength, all of that, you just end up being more sedentary because you don't feel as strong. And the less active you are, it just puts you into a whole different bucket, if that
Sure,
makes sense.
sure. How can people, you mentioned kind of a protein target, so
Yeah.
much protein per meal. How can people meet that amount when they eat?
Yeah. So the way to approach protein, I mean, what a lot of people do is they don't have a lot of protein at breakfast and lunch, but then they try to eat, all their protein at dinner with a steak or something. But really, the best strategy is to spread it out throughout the day. Our body is much more likely to digest, absorb, and utilize the protein that we get if it's spread out throughout the day. And that's not just people as they age. I worked with athletes at Stanford, right? You mentioned it in my bio. For young athletes, it's the same thing. I'm still going to say the same thing for them. And basically, if our target, a pretty good workable target for a lot of people is 60 grams of protein a day. So that might be trying to get 20 grams at breakfast at minimum, right? 20 grams, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, I'm going to tell you, is probably the most difficult meal to hit 20 grams. Because you think eggs, right? Eggs are amazing. And I pay that extra, whatever it is, to get pasture raised eggs. You're going to have orange yolks in those pasture raised eggs. They're going to have higher levels of everything you want in eggs and lower levels of what you don't want in eggs. But there's way more things that you want in eggs. Eggs are amazing. But anyway, each one has about 6 grams of protein. So even if you do a 2-egg omelet or something, that's still 12 grams. You're still not at 20. So that, it does get a bit harder for breakfast, but it can be done. Eggs are amazing. I look for cheese, a nice cheese to be added to things. I use that ultra filtered milk to make a latte, and boy, that packs a wallop. Greek yogurt. Oh my goodness. A nice plain Greek yogurt. I just use that all the time. To me, it's sour cream. It's the base for a healthier mayonnaise. I'll make that with some extra virgin olive oil and some herbs and spices. Anyway, I use it for my overnight chia puddings. I make yogurt parfaits
Oh,
also.
wow.
Anyway, those are just easy. And just adding nuts and berries, nuts and nut butters um, to your if you're an oatmeal person, make it with the ultra filtered milk instead of water. That'll add calcium, vitamin D, protein. And stir in some, natural style peanut butter. Boom, you've got some more protein there. So it's just looking for all those little opportunities to get it throughout the day. Another tip I would say on protein is um, getting a variety of protein. So you're not just, you're not just going to chicken or eggs, but really looking at all the different ways you can get your protein. In particular, I really try to enjoy an omega-3. You've probably heard of anti-inflammatory omega-3s.
Yes.
We get them from fish. Yes. Salmon. I have salmon once a week, probably. I just love me some salmon. But we also get it from, you want to get your omega-3s there. Yes. But you also want, to get a boost of fiber from protein sources like beans, right? That was the other thing that we said several times a week. Now, beans are interesting because they give you plant protein, right? They are off the charts in terms of the plant world, but they also give you fiber. So, and you also need fiber as you age. And that's just a lot of good things come from fiber. So, and there's many types of fiber. So that's why you want your fiber from lots of different plant foods. So you get all the different types of fiber and all the things that come with it. So, that's hopefully that helps a little bit on the protein front. I can also, I want to give you another, there's a research study that came out recently, and in this large research group of female nurses, they found that protein, especially plant protein in midlife, so for your listeners in midlife, this was associated with higher odds of healthy aging. And that just kind of sums it up, right? I
Sure.
mean, that just puts it there to me.
No,
So, go ahead, Richard. Did you have a question?
well, I'm just going to say, I'm listening to all this, and folks, an amazing amount of information. And I'm going to encourage you again, pass this episode on, mom, dad, grandparents, in laws, friends. This is great information. I mean, I always tell people it's great to be older today than it was yesterday. That means we're still here. And obviously, we need to be eating properly. And the information that Elaine is giving us is just fantastic. A couple minutes ago, you were talking about people that are hitting 100 and
Yeah.
more, and we're seeing more and more people in that category. What are we learning from these folks?
Yep, it's been fascinating. I mean, it was called Blue Zones some years ago, but there's some local dietitians here in Idaho that have been doing their own research and asking meeting with and hanging out with some of these centenarians, people who had hit the 100 mark. And just basically, I mean, how fascinating is that? Looking for the common denominators in this special group of people around the world, right? Because they're hitting the Mediterranean, people in Japan, um, even here. So it's interesting. And here's some of the common denominators, the key, as I like to say, the keys to longevity. Basically, number one, they were eating genuine foods, whole foods, fresh, local, organic. Um, in organic in particular, I mean, I'm looking for organic more than ever in my life. They seem to, obviously there's going to be less of the pesticides and things like that, but it does seem to have a higher antioxidant capacity in research. So just something to keep in mind. And what that means when you're eating more of these whole genuine foods, you're eating less of that processed food, right? There's a new term being used called ultra processed. And basically how I tell people that is it something that was created in a lab, right? Or 100 years ago, did they have Ritz bits? You know what I mean? Not to call out Ritz bits, but things like that. Like, was it created in a lab or was it created, in a farm? You know what I mean? So just kind of keeping that in mind. Not that you can't have ultra processed food ever again. It just means as you age, just kind of putting more attention, right, to the more genuine foods. And then these people cooked and ate meals at home. Wow, what a concept, because when you're cooking at home, you're more likely to be having those genuine foods, right? And you're controlling the type of fat that you're cooking with, the types of vegetables you're adding to it. But also, meals are more social. They're finding pleasure in these foods and in these meals. There's a connectedness that to their community or their family that comes with those meals eaten at home. They're having vegetables at every meal. A lot of them have their own gardens, nurture their own gardens. And they're really trying to have vegetables every single meal. And I would even say snack on vegetables. Have some veggies ready to go. Maybe you know carrots, zucchini sliced, cucumber sliced, broccoli, cauliflower, um, and little what do you call them, heads, or not heads, but little florets. And having some nice hummus or whatever it is, or a yogurt based dip to just enjoy them as a snack. And then they also had fermented foods. And there do seem to be some anti-aging effects in scientific studies of fermented foods. And in case your audience needs to just kind of be reminded, like, what is a fermented food. And listen, when I read this list, just remember the ones that you like, that are meaningful to you, because for me, the first one doesn't resonate. It's sauerkraut. I'm just not a sauerkraut person. Can't do it. Don't want to do it. So I'm going to find the other ones on the list, right? Okay. To- Tofu, sourdough, cheese, pickles, chutney, kefir, red wine. I bet some people like that one. Yogurt, kimchi, kombucha, miso, soy sauce, sour cream, although I use yogurt instead of sour cream, Tabasco sauce, tempeh, Worcestershire sauce. Those are just some of them I wouldn't put. That's the full list, but I would give more credibility to some of them, like yogurt, the tofu, pickles, kefir, some of those things that you can do every day, in order to get your fermented foods if you can.
Wow.
And then plant-based eating. A lot of them plant focused or plant powered eating doesn't have to mean plants only. It just means you're really filling half your plate or a large portion of your plate with plants. And then they had physical movement. They definitely stayed physically active, walking around town, walking to get their groceries in town, tending their garden, that sort of thing. And they had a socialization. They were very social within their communities and their families. They had a certain amount of gratitude in their life. They lived life sort of in a mindful, grateful state. So that, I mean, boy, we should all aim for that, right?
I I would agree. I mean, folks, this is unbelievable, fantastic information. As we get close to wrapping up, Elaine, so how is your perspective on food and diet as we age? How has that changed, if it has?
Well, it definitely has. I just think my own journey has taught me so much. Like the last year, tending to my mom and sort of seeing somebody at the end of their life, and how quickly, Richard, how quickly things can change.
Yes,
For somebody, like all you need for some people is one fall, to just kind of, you know, precipitate a cascade of challenges, right? But beyond that, just me personally, I'm also way more aware now that our body can change. It can develop food sensitivities or allergies that you never had. Also conditions, right, that you didn't know you even, could have. It's just, I'm more and more, I think for me, it's important to understand the underlying causes of things, get to the bottom of it, right?
sure.
Like, I think just our healthcare system in general has become, a band-aid, right? Where you're just, is there a pill, I can take for this, instead of saying, why? Why has this changed? Why is my blood pressure increasing? Why are my inflammatory markers higher, all of a sudden? Like, what's going on? Um, and I think also, lastly, I've always had a respect for the microbiome, but now more than ever, you research is backing me up here, where, and by microbiome, I mean sort of that the balance of bacteria that's in your intestinal tract. And we know that so much of our immunity comes from that. But having, a balance of good and bad, we know we're going to have bad bacteria, but having enough good bacteria in there really does impact inflammation, how food is absorbed, what our immune system's like. So I think that's also changed for me, right? I'm more inclined to look to the microbiome for answers.
Again, folks, amazing information. Folks, you're going to be really startled with what I'm about to say. We're about 35, 36 minutes into this episode. I have not mentioned, as of yet, I'm about to, my four-letter dirty word called plan. I mean, think about everything Elaine's been talking about. It is planning. It is being proactive. It is understanding both the exercise and the diet, what you're eating, what you shouldn't be eating, how you're eating, protein, etc. This is wonderful information. I mean, here again, bad word, assuming. I'm assuming most people want to stay pretty healthy as we age. It isn't fun to not be healthy from an illness, from a fall, both. So that planning, that being proactive, that understanding what we're putting into our mouth and our body is so important. Elaine, if people want to reach out to you, what do you want to give out? Phone number, email, any website, social media, etc.
Probably the best way to keep track of me is through my social media. So for anybody on Instagram, it's at the recipe doctor, all spelled out, all lowercase, the recipe doctor. And then everything, and I post daily, seriously. So I put a lot of effort into my Instagram. Please follow me. Please tell your friends. The more the merrier in that regard. And if you're on Facebook, because I get it, I get that people aren't on Instagram and maybe they're on Facebook. Everything I post on the Recipe Doctor on Instagram goes to a Facebook page with the same name. So you can follow me and track me down on Facebook with the name The Recipe Doctor, again, lowercase, all spelled out.
Fantastic, folks. As we get ready to wrap up, if you want to get in touch with me, you have a comment, you have questions, you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, that email again, eldered2023@gmail.com. I really want to thank Elaine. I want to thank all you folks for listening. And until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day.